Welcome to my channel, Urja Potentials. Today we shall be looking at the history, English history from the earliest times. We shall look at English history from the earliest times and we shall include these key points. The first is the pre-Christian Celts and their occupation of England. Second, Julius Caesar's invasion of England in BC 55. Third, the Roman settlement in England and how they continued to rule this region. Then the arrival of Christianity in the world, 1st century AD. So the arrival of Christianity in the world and the impact it had on the Roman Empire, that will be the next point. And then the establishment of Constantinople in 330 AD. Next point will be how the Romans left England for good in 410 AD and why they did that. The next will be the invasion of the Angles, the Saxons and the Jutes and how they entered England. The next will be the arrival of Christianity in England in 597 AD. Alfred the Great of Wessex. Alfred the Great of Wessex, he was a king who was very strong and powerful, and he is associated with the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. And finally, the Battle of Hastings on 14th October 1066 and how William Norman from Normandy, he came to England, he conquered this region and he established his rule here. So let's begin now. The pre-Christian Celts. So this is before the arrival of Christianity in the world. The pre-Christian Celts were the first to occupy this land which we know as England. This whole region was extremely cold and so people didn't dare to come to this region. The Celts did that. They came here, they settled here, and they were basically very savage people. They were savage. They lived by killing others and then they cut off the heads, and somehow they believed that there was something, special about the head. So they worshipped the head. And they had a set of priests who were known as the Druids. So these Celts were the earliest settlers of this land. In BC 65, the Romans started looking at this place. The Roman Empire was huge and very, very powerful. And so it was divided into, 3 kingdoms, and each kingdom had its own emperor. Julius Caesar was one of the emperors here. And from BC 65, the people of his land, he himself, everyone had started taking interest in this new region called England. And in BC 55, Julius Caesar invaded this land. He was able to easily conquer this land because the Celts were fed up of fighting among one another. They lived in great peril and they were not willing to, give in to one another. And so they quietly accepted the Romans and they were ready to be their subjects. So now Julius Caesar has conquered this land, and he will go back to his kingdom because he feared that if he left his kingdom unprotected, the other two emperors may, do something. And so he went back, but he left his statesmen here in England. These people will run this place. So this will continue for a very, very long time. It will continue right up to 410 AD. That is, the Romans will continue their rule here. Now let's take a look at a very, very important event that happened. We saw that Christianity arrived, and when Christianity arrived in the world, the first church was set up in Rome. The first church was established in Rome, and as we saw, Rome, the whole kingdom was divided into 3 parts, and so it was a period when people were frightened. Ignorance results in fear. Knowledge results in empowerment. And people had no knowledge of anything. They were ignorant about life in general, so they were frightened, and they were easily bullied by the church and the church authorities. Somewhere around 330 AD, one of the Roman emperors called Constantine the First. Now, he wanted to be diplomatic. He didn't want to annoy the Pope, and at the same time, he didn't want to be controlled by the church. And so, he decided to establish his capital at a different place, and he did that in the place which was once known as, Byzantium, the Byzantine Empire. There was a king called Byzas, and he established that Byzantine Empire, and it was beginning to disintegrate. And Constantine the First established his rule there. He made it his capital. He called it the New Rome, and he invited all the wealthy people to come and settle here. He invited the scholars to come and settle here. He invited the tradesmen to come and settle here. And this place was a wonderful place because it afforded lots of opportunities for trade. There were trade routes. And so this place was ideal for trade purposes. So many wealthy people came and they settled in this place called Constantinople after Constantine the First. Now, the Germanic tribes, these were nomadic groups. They were very, very savage. There were more than 50 tribes at that time, and they used to, occupy any region which they felt was easy to occupy, but they never dared to, look at Rome, because they knew that the 3 Roman emperors were very powerful and they guarded their empires very well. And so the Germanic tribes did not have that kind of courage to invade Rome. But after 330 AD, when Constantine kept moving back and forth from Rome to Constantinople, the Germanic tribes were quick to recognize an opportunity here. They knew that if they kept watch, they would find an opportunity when they could somehow, invade this land. And they did all that around 407 AD. Now, this is 77 years after the establishment of Constantinople. So Constantine the First must have died the next ruler, whoever. Now, these Germanic tribes are going to invade Rome. How will they do it? They'll do it stealthily. From 407 onwards, they started entering the land. Nobody could recognize who they were because they had fair skins, they had blue eyes, and so they looked like any of the Romans. It was very difficult to distinguish, that this is so and so, this is one of the Germanic tribes or any such thing. And so they silently continued to live in this place. And in 410 AD, the Germanic tribes, they attacked this place. It was an attack from the inside. Now the ruler was away at Constantinople and the attack has happened here. There was panic and all the Romans who had settled outside, they were all forced to rush back home. They had to rush home to look after their homes and properties here, and England had a number of influential Romans who had settled there, and these people were all forced to leave everything in England and rush back to Rome. They had to rush back home, and home was Rome. So when the Romans left this place, they left England for good. The Celts were at their wits' end. They didn't know how to manage. The thing was that they had given up their fighting spirit. They had become absolutely subdued. They were living a life of quiet and peace under the Romans. The Romans had, built a lot and they had civilized these people. And so when the Romans left England for good, the Celts didn't know how to deal with that. So they were open, completely. They were unsafe and they were open to attacks from invaders from outside. And so we will have the invasion of the Jutes from Jutland, the Angles and the Saxons in 449 AD. Hengest and Horsa, they are Jutes from Jutland, and they are going to come to this place and they are going to elbow the Celts out. They'll have to go to the mountainous regions and the plains will be occupied by these invaders, and once again life in England becomes tumultuous. Again, that civilized period was almost over, and these invaders are very, very rough, and they believe in looting and killing and destroying and plundering and things like that. Now, in 597 AD, Pope Gregory of Rome sends Saint Augustine to a region in England known as Kent, what we know as Canterbury. And this region had a population of 6,000. There were 6,000 people in Kent. And so the Pope sent Saint Augustine to this land to convert these people to Christianity. And when Saint Augustine will come here to Kent, he will be able to convert these people. They were very willing to do that, the people of England. And in 603, the Canterbury Cathedral will be established. So Christianity entered England in the 6th century AD, that is 597 AD to be precise. Now, after this, there will be other invaders. The Danes will come. you have the rule of Alfred the Great of Wessex. He's the king who's not only powerful, but he is scholarly. He's associated with the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, which he has partly authored, let's say. And so he's a man of letters, and he's going to encourage these literary activities here. And all this will continue till the year 1066. Precisely on 14th October 1066, the Battle of Hastings will be fought. William Norman from Normandy, he came to this place, he fought that Battle of Hastings, and he conquered England. From here, a fresh age will begin. Now, this period has a rich literature of its own. This whole period from 449 to 1066 is known as the Anglo-Saxon period. The Anglo-Saxon period has its own literature. The literature is different in the pre-Christian era, because we have to remember that Christianity came here in 597 AD. So anything which was written earlier is actually a pre-Christian work. And after Christianity came here, there was a fresh spate of literature which was mainly religious, and some part of it was secular too. When we look at the secular literature of this period, the first thing that comes to our mind is Beowulf. Beowulf is one of the most important texts of this period. This is it's a pagan work and it's a pre-Christian work. It pertains to Scandinavia. It has about 3182 lines. It is written in the West Saxon dialect, and it's a story of adventure, really. Now, there is a hero called Beowulf, and he comes to the court of Hrothgar the Dane, and he has come here because he has been invited to come here. Hrothgar's court is disturbed by a monster called Grendel every night. And Hrothgar doesn't know what to do about it. And what happens is that every night they used to have this, a kind of campfire going, and all the thanes sitting around and singing with the harp. They used to sing about their families, their clans, and things like that. And attendance started becoming less because of this monster who arrived here every night, and he used to pounce on one of these people when they used to be sleeping on the benches, and that Grendel monster would carry the person he had pounced on to his place, to his den. So now Beowulf will come here and he will set this court free of this terror called Grendel. And so this epic work, Beowulf, is about the adventures of Beowulf and how he defeated Grendel. He goes up to Grendel's den, and Beowulf has a magical sword, and he goes down the sea and he kills Grendel, and he comes up, and Grendel's mother then comes. She comes to take revenge, and Beowulf is able to slay her too. The epic continues, describing the adventures of Beowulf over the next 50 years. And it ends with the death of Beowulf. In modern times, the poet Seamus Heaney has reworked parts of this Beowulf. The name Beowulf did not appear as the title in the original poem, but the poem got its name from the name of the protagonist. Beowulf is a part of the manuscript which we know as the Nowell Codex. Now, there were 4 ancient codices which housed Anglo-Saxon literature. Which were these 4 codices? The first was the Exeter book. The second was the Vercelli book. The third was the Nowell Codex. And the fourth was the Piedmont manuscript. Now let's take a look at the Exeter book. What is this Exeter book? It is one of the ancient collections of Anglo-Saxon verse. It contains a number of poems, both secular and religious. And let's see what all the Exeter book contains. So it has a poem called Deer's Lament, a poem in 42 lines. Now this poem has an interesting refrain. It is sung by a scop. You know the scop. Scop is a poet, and he's singing at his lord's court, and he says that past and this too may. This is a refrain which occurs frequently in Deer's Lament. Now, what does this mean? This scop is feeling miserable because he has lost the favor of his lord. Somebody has, replaced this scop in the lord's affections. And so the scop is feeling unhappy. Then he remembers that these things are common, happenings amongst humans. And so he consoles himself. He says, that passed and this too may. So Deer's Lament is a part of the Exeter book. Then you have the Ruin, which is an elegy in Old English, and it's of unknown authorship. Now you have the wife's complaint. You have the husband's message. These are poems which are contained in the Exeter book. You also have the seafarer. It is the monologue of an old sailor, the seafarer. Then you have Wolf and Eudacer. It's a dramatic monologue, and it exists as a fragment in the Exeter book. There are only 19 lines to this text. So all these are contained in the Exeter book. The Exeter book also contains 95 riddles, and as we saw earlier, it contains a number of religious poems. So now you have a poem called Christ in 3 parts, which appears in this Exeter book. You also have 2 poems related to Saint Guthlac, and so on. When we talk of Anglo-Saxon literature, we will have to see 2 names. One is Piedmont and the other is Cinewulf. Now, Piedmont was believed to be an uneducated shepherd. We first hear about him from Bede. Bede is a prose writer of this Anglo-Saxon period. And so Piedmont was inspired, it is said, in a dream. That's what Bede tells us. That Caedmon was inspired in a dream to sing of creation. And so he sang two songs, the Genesis and the Exodus, both of which are biblical. Then we have the name of Cynewulf, and Cynewulf was the first poet who signed his name in the runic pattern, and he assigned his name to 4 poems. Which were those 4 poems? Christ, which we saw, in 3 parts in the Exeter book. Christ, Juliana, then Elaine, and Faith of the Apostles. Then we have the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, partly authored by King Alfred the Great. And so all these form Anglo-Saxon literature. From 1066 onwards begins the Anglo-Norman period, and we'll take a look at that in the next video.